Yes, you are not hearing things or seeing things. I've kind of decided to make this an audio video, a podcast style video. I kind of want to dip my toe back into doing audio only stuff. Something different, saves people from looking at me, but I've got quite a few topics and things going on in the wrestling world, medical situations, awards and honours being given out, concerns, big events, lots of things have been happening recently, along with WWE Network content that I want to talk about. So I thought, why not make it a podcast style episode? Probably won't save me on upload time because it seems to take forever right now, but why not actually do something a little bit different and cover all of the stories in one go. As I said, they're all wrestling related. The first news story that I'm covering is what the news that broke this morning, obviously timed for the UK audience to have that news reach them in the very early hours. I got up something weird, like just about 8:30 this morning, and the news was already out. WWE are crediting Corey Graves with the After the Bell podcast for releasing the news. To be honest, I actually saw it. I happened to see it on Georgia Smith's Instagram, his daughter, and that is, of course, the British Bulldog is going into the WWE Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2020. Such major news, and this comes after how many years now of this has been campaigning from different sources, different people, officially, unofficially, from various different wrestling shows, British Wrestling Radio, to all the Ministry of Islam, and lots of, and I'm not saying these are guys are absolutely responsible, but there's been, especially British Wrestling Radio, those kind of people have been campaigning for this, let's be honest, just for quite a few years, and it's finally happening. It was apparently organised about a month ago, but Georgia and the family and obviously WWE are just releasing the news today. He is set to be inducted, of course, at the WrestleMania weekend, if that goes ahead. More on that later. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about his career, about the British Bulldogs, about his tag team with his cousin, genuine cousin, the Dynamite Kid. People who want to know about him will go out and search his matches, even though younger fans who are hearing this news don't exactly know who he is, because it's, obviously he's no longer with us, and it's been many years now, sadly, since he left us. But honestly, for those outside of the UK, the British Bulldog's legacy, his star power, continues to inspire many wrestlers, wrestling fans, people involved in the UK wrestling industry, independent, whether they want to make it to WWE in some capacity or not. His legacy still looms very, very tall over the British wrestling world. He gone from the world of sport as Young Davey, I believe it was his name, to Stampede Wrestling, to wrestling in Japan, and then of course to WWE. He was on WCW, and then went back to WWE in the latter days of his career. But he continues to inspire many people, and I'm not going to sit here and say he was a perfect guy, and what an honour this saint richly deserves. I don't know the guy, so I don't like to make judgments in these situations. Obviously he had his demons, his problems, which may have led to him leaving us early, but as I said, his legacy still looms very, very tall over British wrestling. And let's be honest, in terms of achievement, his career, his what he was able to do, which companies that he worked for, he is certainly one of the top UK wrestlers. I would actually arguably put William Regal above Bulldog, just in terms of achievements and longevity and how the contributions that he's made. But British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, many wrestling fans will still fondly remember him, as I do myself. I'm not saying I don't, because he was one of the guys, and let's be honest, WWE got lucky with him. WWE got very lucky in the late 80s, early 90s, when they were expanding into the UK market, starting to run shows, have their television on Sky Sports, when professional wrestling from America was getting onto TV screens here in the UK, whether it be on Sky Sports or ITV, which is basic television channel number 3, which showed WCW in starting from the late 1980s through to just before the mid 90s. WWE got lucky having such a guy to lead interest from UK fans into the WWE product, and having a guy who was just so talented and was able to capture their attention, their interest. Also, we all know about SummerSlam 1992 and everything that happened there. Still a great match, still a good event, still watched continuously again on the WWE network. So I would say to fans who may not have heard about the British Bulldog, go check his stuff out, even some of the WCW pay-per-views. I'm sure you can go on Wikipedia, look up when exactly, I'm not sure dates and events that he was in WCW, but even just look, I'm sure that I think it's still limited a little bit. I don't think you get to see all of it, but certainly you can do the superstar search on the WWE network as well, and it'll come up with events and matches that he was part of. So yeah, it's a massive bit of news, a great piece of news, I think, to have the British Bulldog go into the WWE Hall of Fame. I think it's richly deserved. Like I said, his standing, his legacy looms tall over and in British wrestling. Honestly, the response is very, very positive so far. Obviously, there will be some people who will be negative, but overwhelmingly the reaction has been extremely positive, in my opinion. Just looking on Twitter here, and if you can hear any clicks or that's just me checking Twitter. I'm not going to go through Twitter, but yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I'm happy to see it kind of ends the campaign. Maybe Dynamite Kid is the next campaign he was against joining the WWE Hall of Fame, but we'll see what happens in the future. Maybe that will be something that will be taken up by people. But yeah, I'm very happy to see the British Bulldog going into the WWE Hall of Fame, richly deserved. And again, I'll get to it later, but if WrestleMania goes forward, I would love to see the Hart-Smith family, join together once again to remember him. I also want to go and mention Scott Steiner. We have all heard the news the last week or so about Scott Steiner backstage in Impact Wrestling taping. Took on well. Different stories of exactly what happened, but he has had some type of open heart surgery, which I was listening to. I think it was last week's episode of the Jim Cornette Experience, and Jim Cornette, I think it was, and Brian Lasty, co-host, agrees. Any kind of heart surgery is nothing minor at all. Thankfully, all reports are that he is going to be okay. Like I keep saying, I've said many times, I grew up a WCW fan. The Steiner brothers are genuinely my favourite tag team of all time. Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, just sitting behind them. But the Steiner brothers, in their heyday, again in the early 90s, and I'm beginning to sound old and I hate how that kind of sounds, but the Steiner brothers in their heyday, they could wrestle any style. Amateur style, of course, from the University of Michigan. They could do the strong Japanese Purisi style. and I know I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but they could work with the Japanese guys. They could do a typical American style match. They could do the street fight matches with the weapons, and they could do any type of match. And it's great to hear in the news that hopefully he will be able to make a full recovery. I think he's 57 years old. 57. It's amazing to think that out. It's, again, I'm beginning to sound old, but a lot of the guys I watched growing up, it's even in the early 90s in WWE, especially when people pass away, like the British Bulldog, when you hear their ages, it's like, wow, you'd think they were a lot older than they were. But hopefully we'll have Big Papa Pump, the big bad booty daddy. I guarantee somebody's going to clip that probably, but anyway, I hope we have Scott Steiner, as somebody roars in the background, you may hear that, but hopefully we'll have Scott Steiner around for many, many years to come. Glad to hear that he's making a full recovery. Very scary situation when that happens. We've had a few wrestlers having medical issues lately, but great to hear that he got immediate attention. We don't know the specifics. Maybe once he makes a full recovery, we may get the full story from him on a podcast or appearance, interview. I don't know, not obviously with me, but with maybe Bill Apter or one of these podcasts that are out there. Because I know he did a quick interview with David Penzer. He and his brother Rick were doing a joint appearance at some kind of wrestling convention, so I've got that loaded up onto my MP3 player and I'll listen to that. He's just there too, or just one of the guests that David Penzer interviews, and I think it was just like a couple of days before all this it was recorded and released. But great to hear the good news about Scott Steiner. It's good news on the health front for once, for right now. It's good to actually hear some decent medical news. Again, more on that later on. I want to talk now, I am pausing a little bit, going to the next segment. I want to talk about WWE Network, and I do want to talk about a couple of the programs that are on the WWE Network right now. The feature of WWE, the FCW story, I believe it's called. That is a documentary has just been released. I think it was it was on Sunday it was released. I watched it the other night, and that's a really good documentary. I've always wanted to see a documentary basically telling the entire history of WWE developing and gaining talent, and I think that this episode, along with the Ohio Valley Wrestling episode of what is going to be, I believe, the second part of the Ruthless Aggression series, which the second part will be coming later this year, according to reports, will hopefully go a long way towards this. And I hope that OVW episode is a decent episode. I don't think it was going to live up to the FCW episode, but it was. But hopefully it will tell a decent story of Ohio Valley Wrestling. And I will say, before I go on, talk about this FCW episode of I was going to say Ruthless Aggression, but it's not. It's a standalone documentary. If anybody wants to, I mentioned Jim Cornette there. If you want to, Jim did do a deep dive. It was released over Christmas. Due to the holidays, it may very well still be up on their podcast page. I think it's either check out the Jim Cornette's drive-through or the Jim Cornette Experience. It will be on one of those two feeds. But Jim did a couple of deep dives on Ohio Valley Wrestling, his time there, and I think they're worth listening to for wrestling fans. It gives you a little bit more of a background of how things ran when being a WWE developmental system company, I suppose you could call it. But this FCW story, Florida Championship Wrestling, set up by Steve Kern, and this basically tells the story of Florida Championship Wrestling, which was of course based in a warehouse basically in Tampa, Florida, and its story over, I think it's about 4 or 5 years or so, maybe 6 years, maybe even 6 or 7 years of being a WWE developmental, and being the main WWE developmental system or place. This is a really good documentary. One of the great things it opens up basically is telling you Steve Kern's story, establishing who he is again to younger audiences. People will not know who he is. He's very well respected. He's been involved in wrestling for many years as a wrestler, part of the Fabulous Ones, for example, as we see, and then he works as a road agent for WWE, and then eventually goes to the idea. I mean, basically, it's kind of Steve Kern, and I'm sure there'll be other people involved along the way, but it's Steve Kern who's kind of basically, it seems, kicks off this, okay, why don't we have a single developmental system place? Why don't we have a single place to send all those talents who are under developmental contracts? Because for those who don't know, and it's not really mentioned, but over the years, even during the 90s, and again I'm talking about the 90s a lot in this video, but it's just what's coming up, it's just what these things are based on. WWE had their developmental talent based everywhere across the United States. I think UPW, is in California, Memphis, where of course Kurt Angle famously got his start. There was, again, Ohio Valley Wrestling. There was a few different places. I even once saw two guys who were under WWE developmental contract here in Dundee, an all-star wrestling show. They were taking part in the tour there. So they had guys under developmental contract who were literally all over the place, and this was basically the first time that really it was all concentrated on one location. There's a real. I'm not going to go right into the story of this documentary because I really want people to sit down. And I talk about these things again, and I keep saying this also, but I want people to sit down and watch this. These documentaries themselves, and gain their own opinion on it. I think it's a really good documentary. You see a lot of the young guys, literally the future of WWE. Many of the guys that we see now, from Sheamus to Drew McIntyre to Paige, Titus O'Neil, we even see Seth Rollins, who's one of the guys one of the people interviewed for this documentary. I can't remember his name now, but there's a senior VP, and obviously Steve Kern gives his opinion throughout the documentary. We see many of the talents' story of their time in FCW, and that was really good. So a lot of this footage that we see in the documentary hasn't been seen before. It's not really mostly been aired. I believe there's some of the FCW stuff still on YouTube. I'm still convinced we may have gotten a little bit of FCW on UK TV. I'm pretty convinced we did, or maybe I did just see it on YouTube, but I'm sure we got a little bit of that on TV, but it may have just been on YouTube. I've watched it, but and I don't think there's much of it on at all, if there's any at all, on the WWE network itself. But it's great to see, especially as you see the story of the FCW continue. You see these guys, and you see, especially with guys like Sheamus and Drew. I mean, especially, I think Sheamus is the best example of this. You see, and I think Sasha Banks as well is a good example, a good female example. You see the kind of outlines of the character, the persona, the person they're going to be in WWE, and you start to see it all come together. And especially at one point you hear, you see the kind of, well, you don't really see the transformation, but you see footage, again unseen footage of basically the very, very start of Bray Wyatt, as he even has Luke Harper in the background. You see Bray Wyatt coming to life. So in one of the early promos that he is doing to the class and about communication class, and I will say, one of the things that struck me a lot during this episode is just how emotional Charlotte Flair is. You see her, every time you see her, she has tears in her eyes. Obviously speaking about Dusty Rhodes, who was basically her uncle, really, by kind of a de facto uncle. I don't know how she exactly thinks of him. If you're talking about family relatives, about where she would place him, but certainly I would say roughly an uncle would be correct, at least. You can see, you can just see how emotional she is talking about him, and obviously, because it was amazing to think, and I think Dusty must have been being paid by WWE at this point, because FCW, it's a great example of basically being a part of WWE, but this FCW, even though they've got, let's say they've got Sheamus, Drew McIntyre, Sasha Banks, the Wyatt family, they've got Titus O'Neil, Tyson Kidd, Natalia, the Bella Twins, a lot of really young talent. It looks basically, you see how the FCW basically operated as an indie company, as an indie wrestling company, an independent wrestling company, really, because you hear about them doing everything themselves, not having much budget, Steve Kerr being financially responsible. Basically, there was no unlike you said, I think NXT was the very first time that WWE would do anything, and I know it's slightly different because WWE owns NXT, it's their brand, I don't know how exactly legally it is, but NXT is basically a brand of WWE. FCW wasn't, right, we'll focus all our developmental talent, and Mr. Steve Kern, here's $2 million to do all this. It's amazing, and that's how it worked. Like I mentioned earlier, that's how it worked for so many of these developmental talent related companies who had relationships with WWE to kind of teach and develop WWE's talent. Basically, I'll say that's what a developmental system is, but it wasn't like WWE were going, right, here's some of our guides and here's a lot of money for doing so. It's amazing just how independent they were, and I think it's a great way to learn. I'll be honest, I think it's a great way to learn that maybe some of the shows they had certain help, but most of the shows, I think, like obviously in independent wrestling, it's the way it is because it is the way that it has to be, and that is, again, this is the way that I believe it should be, is that the FCW talent, they would make their way to the town. It wasn't like they are WWE superstars these days. If you have a Sheamus or again a Sasha Banks or whoever turning up at a WWE event, obviously the ring is there for them, set up, the seating is set up, the arena is set up for the show. FCW, they had to do it all. They literally had to set up the ring, they set up the seating, they made the venue ready for the show, did the show, and once the show is done and the crowd is gone, they do what is commonly known as tear down, or tearing down, or tearing it down, which is loading everything out. Also, there's a few different phrases for it, but they had to take things apart, take the ring apart, put it back in the ring truck, make sure everything, set up the merch stand, take that down. They had to do basically everything that you'd think was part of that is part of an independent wrestling show. They had to do it, and I believe actually, I don't know what the latest is, but certainly it was Breaking Ground, I think it was called, that NXT documentary. I'm going to have to see if that's still on the network and rewatch that. But we saw NXT guys, NXT superstars, do that also. Or for some of the shows, they had to basically put out some of the stars that you'll see on the show, making the venue ready, and then afterwards taking it all down, taking it all apart. And I think that is exactly the way it should be in an independent wrestling show, and I'm not one qualified really to talk about why that should be. My basically comments is that it's I don't know, I'm getting a little bit off topic here, a little bit, slightly, but I think the way that I don't think I'm really getting off topic too much, because the way that FCW was, I think it was great, because, you're learning the business literally from the ground up, putting the ring together. You're showing your work ethic. You're getting to know, the ring. Obviously, that's part of the reason. There's so many reasons why you do that. So the ring inside and out. What the platform. So not only how to do the moves, but right. It's dangerous to drop an opponent on his head anyway, but it's dangerous to try and kind of recreate that safely on this part of the ring, because there's metal sticking out here, or you get to know the environment you're working in, basically, without going into it too much of a thing. But FCW story is really good, and you see these superstars develop, and you really see them come together, and it seems they have really had some good fun as they developed, and of course as we see, and I know it's a little bit WWE spin on this documentary, mostly showing the stars who made it, and the talent, the talent superstars that kind of graduated, I suppose, from FCW to being the WWE superstars. But it really is, it's an hour and 19 minutes. It's a really good document. I would certainly recommend people watching it, and I'm actually glad, before I move on, I'm really glad that they also highlight a couple of people who don't make it. So guys like Wes Briscoe, they also talk about Richie Steamboat, who had a lot of potential as well. And I'm really glad that they spotlight these guys, because not everybody who made it. There's a few. They talk about an Australian guy as well. There's always going to be people who don't make it for whatever reason, or this means Seth Rollins mentioned CJ Parker, who is just doing tremendous things in New Japan Pro Wrestling now. That's the name that people will know him as, but he's doing tremendously well in New Japan right now. So not everybody will fit in with the WWE system or make it within the WWE, or they'll learn a lot there, and then they'll maybe use their skills and become big stars there. But it's a really good documentary FCW story, really worth watching, absolutely worth tuning in for people who've not actually watched it yet. Really worth a really good documentary, great, and you get the complete story even to when they decide to amalgamate everything and start to create NXT, which I would actually like to see again. I would love to see a documentary about the complete history of developmental talent, but if we don't get it, this FCW story and hopefully the Ohio Valley Wrestling story later, the Ohio Valley Wrestling episode later this year, in the second part of Ruthless Aggression, will go towards that. And it's Ruthless Aggression that I do want to talk about. Again, I know I'm talking about a lot of things in this episode. Ruthless Aggression. This series has continued to air on the WWE Network. It's now up to about episode 5. I think now. I haven't watched the latest one with the draft. The first roster draft between Raw and SmackDown that happened with the brand split. But I have watched episodes 2, 3 and 4. I want to really talk about 4 as much, but and just really a couple of minutes on episode 2, which is John Cena. Episode 2 is what I would call a fluff piece. It's basically paying tribute to John Cena, saying how much of a big superstar he is, and tells his story as many other presentations and programs, DVD releases have done in the past. The John Cena Experience, for example, tells his story from being prototype in Ohio Valley Wrestling, to answering Kurt Angle's open challenge, to almost being fired, becoming the Doctor of Thugonomics, to main event in WrestleManias, to being basically just showing him as the big star that he is today. The one thing I will say, it's a shame that this presentation doesn't really concentrate on what feuds and what battles he had when he first entered WWE, because most of the kind of focusing on what he was doing is actually across a couple of WrestleManias. It's really just showing what he does across, was it WrestleMania 20, 21 and 22, possibly even 23. I think it ends with not really mentioning, but showing a little bit of footage of his first battle, I think, with The Rock. There's not a huge amount to talk about this, because we all know his story, and I'm self-admittedly not a huge John Cena fan, and this is just what a great guy. Again, a bit of a tribute episode to him, which doesn't really lend a lot to the story of what happened after the Monday Night Wars. Doesn't really lend a huge amount of story to the Ruthless Aggression era, apart from his use in that promo with Kurt Angle. I will say, before I move on to the Evolution episode, it was obvious to me, and I'm not going to claim to be the only one, because I think a lot of people did realise it, but WrestleMania 20 in 2004, that was obviously WWE crowning Cena as, right, here's our next guy, here's our next main event star, here's the guy that you'll be watching in the next few years. This is the guy that will be, main eventing, and he did it very, very quickly, which I'll talk about in a second. But WrestleMania 20, when he beat the Big Show for the United States Championship, that was WWE saying to everybody, here he is, this is our guy. It was obvious, even before the build-up to WrestleMania 20, that was what's going to happen. At least it was obvious to me. Again, I'm not going to claim to be the only one. I have recognised a few talents along the way, and I'm not, again, saying that I'm the only one to recognise these talents, but WrestleMania 20 was the crowning of Cena being the guy. And very quickly, WrestleMania 21, of course, he beat JBL, who is going into the WWE Hall of Fame this year as well, which I've heard his reports about his behaviour and how he is, and again, I don't know him personally, never met him. I liked his old Bradshaw character over the years, more from kind of the Acolyte era to the APA. He was he had heat, as they call it, as a heel, as a bad guy. People hated him. Him going into the WWE Hall of Fame, no surprise, really. Not going to say who's in. I'm not going to go into the Hall of Fame thing right now. I'll talk about Bulldog, but I'll maybe do an actual video sitting down and talking about the Hall of Fame nearer the time when we know more about what's happening with WrestleMania. But Cena beat JBL at WrestleMania 21, and it was obviously that's the crowning of Cena's being the main event guy. 41 minutes I think this episode lasts for. Not a huge lot to say about this, but any John Cena fan, I'm sure will enjoy it. The Evolution episode was episode 3. Two main stories in this episode, basically. First of all, Ric Flair. Second of all, the opportunity of a lifetime that Randy Orton and Dave Bautista got. The first story, Ric Flair. Now, Ric, we all know, was struggling around about 2002, 3 and 4. He was struggling mentally quite a bit, at a dark place in his life. We all know the story, kind of behind that. And I think, to be honest, a lot, at least a big part of Ric Flair's mental issues, if you could, well, I suppose you can call it that, was obviously the disappearance of Jim Crockett Promotions, which was NWA, which became WCW. The house that Flair built basically was WCW, and to have that suddenly disappear, I equate it to working for a company, being one of the forefront, being one of the main people involved in running a company, not running for a company, but he did have his hand in a lot of the authority over the years. But working at least for that company, for anybody else, any wrestling fan, I would say a lot of his issues came from working for a company for 25, 30 years, basically, again, the lineage of the company, and then for the company to suddenly disappear. It's, you put in all that work, you've put in years of effort to build that company up, and then through either it's been bought out and they decide to shut down your company, or management makes horrible decisions and the company goes out of business very quickly. I think obviously a large part of Ric Flair's issues was the fact that WCW disappeared. That WCW was suddenly gone. For all those years he was WCW, apart from obviously a spell in WWE, but for WCW to suddenly be gone like that, I think was a big shock to him. I don't think he thought it could happen, and basically a lot of his legacy, a lot of his work, a lot of his being was within that company, and there was no WWE network, so it wasn't. In those days, it was very difficult to see WCW content unless you had videotapes. Like I've got a few somewhere now, not as many as I did, but you could not see a lot of the stuff available, so it was almost kind of like WCW disappeared into the history books, and that was it. WCW was dead and gone, so that certainly will have hurt Ric Flair, to be honest. I really do. I think that would that would absolutely really hurt anybody if you worked in a job for years. And so it was great to see Rick really basically befriend Triple H, and Triple H help him. And yeah, of course, Evolution was really a rerun almost in any kind of wrestling stable. Any wrestling stable that has fast cars, a lot of money, that party lifestyle, that kind of business success type of kind of theme to it, or kind of gimmick, that will always be compared to the Four Horsemen. And I know it's basically Triple H retaking Ric Flair back to the 1980s, but maybe that was the treatment that Ric Flair needed, and maybe that was a bit backward. Maybe not everybody agreed with it. It's kind of, instead of having Ric Flair kind of heal up mentally by moving on and doing something different, Triple H took him back to the 1980s basically, and really kind of in a slightly different role, but was still doing the same stuff that he did in his heyday, in his prime. And not that they didn't do it to the degree that that Ric Flair did it, obviously, but it was kind of the same similar environment. But maybe that was the best treatment for Ric Flair, but maybe not. He's had his problems again over the years, but that is certainly one of the main stories. Certainly one thing that, again, being a WCW fan, I really paid attention to was paying attention to. One thing I paid attention to was certainly Ric Flair story. Me here, it is presented. You see him even struggling to be the Nature Boy. So that's certainly one of the main stories for myself, at least in terms of the Evolution story, which is again episode 3 of Ruthless Aggression. The second story, I'm not sure how to term this, but really basically it's the opportunity of a lifetime. It's the multi-million-dollar opportunity that young Randy Orton and slightly older Dave Bautista got in terms of joining Evolution. I will say that Mark Jindrak was almost a part of Evolution, and we hear the reasons why he didn't become part of Evolution. The behaviour of him and Randy Orton together rubbed Triple H up the wrong way. Mark Jindrak did actually go on to have a decent run in CMLL in Mexico. He won their world championship there. Marco Corleone was his name. I think he's more working in realty now. I think it's kind of estate agency kind of stuff. I think he's a realtor now, I think you call it. But certainly, he came very, very close, and I'm glad we hear from Mark Jindrak in this episode, because honestly, it's one of those kind of little touches sometimes on these WWE documentaries that you appreciate, of getting a guy like Jindrak to come in. And I know it may have been painful for him, hopefully a bit cathartic for him, but obviously you'll always get situations like these, get people who are considered but not quite right or ready for such a role. And again, Orton and Batista, they got an opportunity. Orton potentially could have done something. Batista wasn't doing very much. He was the deacon with the Reverend Devon. We hear about that. So both those guys were not doing really anything to go towards the main event, to get to that next level, to be main event stars in WWE. And without this opportunity, who knows what would have happened in their careers. I think Randy Orton still would have shined. Let's be honest, he's a talent. He's a hell of a talent. And again, I've never been a huge Randy Orton fan either, but he's a talent. He's a great talent, and it's obvious. It's, you cannot deny it. Again, I'm not particularly a fan of the guy, but you can't deny his talent. I don't know why, I just never really connected with Randy Orton. If anybody's wondering why I'm not being a fan of him, it's just, I don't know what it is. I just never really felt, oh yeah, Randy Orton, he's one of my guys or whatever. Just never felt that way about him. But again, he's got a lot of skill, a lot of ability. Again, just like all 4 of these guys involved in Evolution, WWE Hall of Fame worthy. When it comes to the opportunity, obviously Randy Orton, again, young guy, was 21, 22, 23 when this kind of happens. I think he's 24 maybe when he wins the World Championship in 2004. He very young, a lot to learn, and that's, to be honest, it's not really just the WWE lifestyle and the money that comes with WWE that kind of has him behaving the way that he does, because he behaved like that before. He was part of, I can't remember which armed forces it was, but he kind of went AWOL from there, and that again, that's another well-known story which is not really mentioned. None of their even in the Cena episode, not in this episode, they really don't talk about their personal lives at all. We don't hear about Nikki Bella, we don't hear about Brie Bella, we don't hear, again, I'm talking about, not that he went out with Brie, I don't believe, but we don't hear about her thoughts on him being Nikki's partner or whatever. We don't hear anything about their personal lives whatsoever. It's all concentrated on the wrestling career. So that really, again, a multi-million-dollar opportunity, and thankfully, as we see as the episode goes along, as Ric Flair and Triple H bring these guys along, apart from an injury, I will quickly want to mention the injury before I move on, because sometimes I jump around in talking about topics like this. The injuries that happen in the Dudley Boys match, I think, just are an accident. I just think that was an accident. I think it was a bad day at the office, like Bully Ray says. Maybe there was a little bit of aggressiveness from Bully Ray, maybe. But unfortunately, accidents do happen. Injuries do happen in the ring. They do happen in professional wrestling. And I just think, I don't think Bully Ray has, and I'm not saying Bully Ray has a reputation for hurting people. It's just Bully Ray is a very, very physical guy. The Dudley Boys are just a very physical team, or were. I had the opportunity to see them once in Glasgow near as Team 3D. I wish I'd just used my phone and taken a couple of pictures there, but that was the one where I had my camera not allowed in at the very, very last second. But anyway, I saw them at the ICW show, and you know, they were just a very physical. They were from ECW, you know, they were from Philly, the New York area. And I know those two separate areas, but you know, that kind of physicality, it's very aggressive style. It's, you know, so I think sometimes it'll happen. I think it was just, again, it's just a bad day at the office. Accidents happen. I don't think it was an intentional thing. It wasn't Bully Ray or Demon saying, right, we'll go out and we'll break these guys, because they would have got fired. They would, let's be honest, if they'd go out and deliberately hurt people, they would have less people to work with, so less people to make money with, and they would have gotten a lot of trouble and possibly fired from WWE. And so I think it was just an accident for both of them getting injured in the same match. In terms of, again, I'm not going to go into, and then this may sound like, you know, I'm kind of jumping over this, but I don't really want to go fully into this hour-long episode. But I will say, in terms of the end of Evolution, it's obvious that when you're talking about the end of Evolution, which I still think in 2004, when they ended Evolution, I think that was a little bit too soon. I'll be honest. I thought that Triple H should have been the guy to say, you know, I think they should have teased the breakup of Evolution more. I think Triple H should have said, look at these two guys, even if you want to put them on different brands, because that's when the titles came in, the WWE title and the World Heavyweight Championship and Raw and SmackDown. Even if you had these two, you know, these guys across the brands, even if you had these two guys split up a little bit, where it comes to, you know, in terms of maybe Randy Orton being on Raw, Batista being on SmackDown, I thought Triple H should have been taking credit for them. These are, you know, him and even maybe having a little bit of an argument with Ric Flair, as Ric Flair saying, "Oh, I've helped you, Triple H, bring these guys up," and then, you know, kind of simmer the ego of Triple H a little bit. You know, have it simmering of Triple H basically saying, right, I made Randy Orton, I made Dave Batista. But again, you know, maybe have him fall out with Ric Flair a little bit. So Ric Flair, well, I helped as well. You know, I mentored you as well, because he did in WCW many years before, which is partly why Triple H really strikes up that friendship again, I would say, with Ric Flair, because obviously Triple H always looked up to Flair. You know, I thought they should have teased the breakup of Evolution a little bit more. In terms of how they did it, obviously they threw Randy Orton out of the group. I think it was maybe even the next day after he won the World Championship at SummerSlam 2004 against Benoit. I think that was more them really saying that, okay, Orton can stand on his own. Orton is capable of being a good guy, and it didn't really work out. I think he was maybe slightly too young, slightly too immature for that first run. Didn't really, you know, as they say, grab and, you know, carry the ball especially well. But I think they were saying, right, Orton can go out on his own. He's got more talent, he's got more ability to do it, but we need to help Batista along, which is why Batista got that tease storyline of, you know, right, Batista's becoming a big star. Batista's becoming a main event guy, winning the Royal Rumble in 2005, and then teasing, right, well, is he going to cash it in on JBL, or is he going to cash it in on Triple H? Obviously he cashed it in Triple H and defeated him for the World Heavyweight Championship. They obviously felt the Batista, and I get it. I think I was of that opinion then, and I'm still of the opinion now, he needed a little bit more help than Orton did. So it was certainly two different paths that they set the guys on. As I said, they thought Orton was more capable, but Batista needed that little bit more help in just developing the skills, getting over a bit more with the crowd as a good guy, as a babyface. That was what they needed. That's what it was obvious to me. Again, I'm not trying to claim any great intelligence in wrestling, but looking back at it now, especially, certainly Batista needed that little bit of extra help in being positioned where he needed to be positioned. So Evolution episode was pretty good. I enjoyed that more than the John Cena episode. Good to see the story of Evolution. As much, again, I was not a huge fan of Evolution, but it was very dominant in those days of 2002, 2003, 2004 to 2005, and obviously since then many appearances have been made by the group. And I would think it's one of the groups that Triple H will always roll out. As long as there's Triple H and Ric Flair and Dave Bautista and Randy Orton, we'll see them appear occasionally, even if it takes a few years between appearances. But pretty good episode. I'm getting on in a bit in time, getting to 52 minutes now. I want to quickly mention the Brock Lesnar episode. I haven't watched the brand split draft episode. The Brock Lesnar episode is quite decent as well. You see the rise of Brock, again coming from OVW, becoming, he is what WWE sees as their big guys. He is, he's a 6 foot. Well, what he WWE, and more specifically Vince McMahon, I should say, really like guys like Brock Lesnar, big, huge, tall, muscular guys who look like they're butt kickers, look like they're going to rip you in shreds, literally. And Brock had an amazing quick run. It was almost like kind of Goldberg WWE style in terms of starting to run through guys, getting to that spot, defeating The Rock for the WWE Championship. There's and obviously Brock is a once in a lifetime, once in a generation, whatever you want to call it, athlete. He's, whatever you think about professional wrestling, it's that old tagline. I can't remember who Jim Cornette, again, what's the word? I can't remember who he attributes it to, but there's always that story when maybe you don't think professional wrestling is real, but I can certainly make you think that I'm real. And for Brock Lesnar, he is real. Mixed martial artist, UFC world champion, a guy who's 6'5", 275, 280, 300 pound almost. Legitimately works out and everything like that. The average guy, the average fan, would not do well in a fight against Brock Lesnar. And that's the kind of attitude that you want, and that's the attitude that Vince McMahon has always wanted, for the average fan to say, yeah, I couldn't beat him in a fight. I'd get my butt handed to me. I'd been in the hospital with one impact, or one kick, one punch, whatever. Brock Lesnar, just heck of an athlete, really, really just amazing. So it's good episode. You show his rise, and it does show you a little bit of his returning, and I'm really glad. To be honest, I would like Brock to sit down and talk about things. He very rarely does. The Broken Skull, what is it, that Steve Austin podcast, whatever it's called, he did that a while ago. But I'm really glad that, again, we hear a lot from Paul Heyman, who really genuinely is very close to Brock, they really are genuinely, good friends. They're, he's not just the advocate for Brock Lesnar on screen. They do obviously have that very, very close personal relationship. So it's great. Paul Heyman is one of the greatest guys in terms of speaking on a microphone. You want him to, you want to get a story across, get Paul Heyman to do it, because he's genuinely just absolutely unbelievable. And so, I mean, it's a little bit presented, Paul Heyman's presentation is quite a little bit kayfabe, in my view. It is a little bit about presenting Brock as, and again, he's a real athlete. I'm not saying that Brock Lesnar is anything but, I'm not saying that he's anything even remotely weakened or whatever, but it is kind of Paul Heyman presenting Brock Lesnar as the character Brock Lesnar rather than the man Brock Lesnar. I mean, maybe that's one and the same. We hear about why that Brock really gets fed up with WWE after even just about 2 years. He made his debut after WrestleMania 18, I think it is, and then left at WrestleMania 20 after the match with Goldberg. It's amazing the effect, and I don't know what people would think of Brock Lesnar if he hadn't returned. That's the one question. If he'd been successful with his NFL tryout, or gotten injured and gone on to have an NFL career, or maybe played American football or football somewhere and got injured and just never returned to WWE or professional wrestling. Obviously, again, none of the Japanese stuff is talked about. He did go to Japan for a little while. None of that is sadly talked about. I would love to have heard that talked about a little bit. But again, it's presentation of the Brock Lesnar character, which again, you kind of understand that. I want to talk about WrestleMania for a couple of minutes, because I want to try and keep this about an hour and a quarter, because I'm already coming up to close to an hour, amazingly, already. But to be honest, I kind of understand WWE presenting these documentaries and these characters and these people the way that they want to, the way giving it the WWE spin. You kind of understand that. I can anyway, because WWE is a business. WWE wants to have these superstars make them money. And I mean, these superstars make WWE money, and of course, a lot of those people, those superstars, if you get in the right position, you'll make a lot of money as well. Obviously, off your salary, merchandise, however it works these days. But to be honest, you kind of understand, because WWE want to present these characters the way that they want to be presented. To be able to have feuds and stories with. Within WWE, within the WWE universe, it's kind of understandable, because kayfabe is not really alive. Again, I've used that term a few times, but kayfabe is not really alive these days. However, WWE wants to protect its business. They want to try, at least as best they can, have these people in a position where, it is, that. Right, well, this superstar, what everybody's impression of this superstar, what people know of this particular superstar, male or female, whether it's Rhea Ripley, Charlotte Flair, whether it's Bobby Fish or Finn Balor or whatever. They want what people think of that person to be as the WWE character, so they can draw money that's going to have them in feuds. So people, he's not really like that, or he's being all aggressive on WWE TV, but he's really just a teddy bear. WWE on the whole, especially again Vince McMahon and the higher ups, they don't want that. They want, if you're presented as a real physical threat to people, they want people to have that impression, and only that impression of you. So you kind of understand WWE putting that spin on things. They want to try and protect their business as best they can. So I kind of understand all this WWE spin on things. I mean, any independent promoter, take for instance, again, I was going to mention SWE, Scottish Wrestling Entertainment here in Dundee. They've just actually opened their training in another facility. They've just moved to, which is, from the photos I've looked, looks really good. I may get a closer look at that very soon, but just because they're holding an event in that location actually on the 28th of March, the Circle in Stafford Place. Might as well give it a plug. If it goes ahead, I'll talk about that in a second. But any independent promoter, they'll want their guys. They want to, if they've got two guys who are really fighting with each other, they don't want everybody outside to basically have, especially if you're an old school style promoter. I mean, some promoters these days won't care really, unfortunately, which I think harms wrestling. But if you've got two guys who are really fighting and biting to get at each other on the shows, you don't particularly want them to be known as being best friends or very, very, very friendly outside. You don't want everybody to, especially major companies like WWE, you don't want everybody to know, these two guys are just they're just telling the story. It's just it's just something that they're doing on TV, because again, it'll harm the drawing power of it if everybody thinks, they're just pretending, and again, that's that detachment, that emotional detachment. Maybe that's another video. I think Brock is most likely, the guy that he is, that we've seen, and I think I understand WWE presenting him as the character and presenting their guys as the characters that they're supposed to be, because again, you want people to be able to even suspend belief, even if you know these people and you think, he's a teddy bear, or she likes this or she likes that, or they're friendly outside the ring, or they're related, or their sister, whatever. WWE will want these characters protected to some degree, so that people will be emotionally invested and then financially invested in any feuds or storylines that these people are actually taking part in. I want to very quickly talk about WrestleMania, and unfortunately the coronavirus, things are getting worse. Oh no. Things are getting worse about that. There is several countries. Italy's gone on lockdown. Ireland, I think the Republic of Ireland's gone on lockdown. There's been a lot of concerns. Scotland, just as I'm recording this, there's the potential, I don't think it's been enacted yet, but it looks like they are, because I'm not following it, I've got the television on in the background with the sound off obviously, but it looks like some public gatherings over 500 people are going to be suspended. So I really do not know what this all means for WrestleMania, and it's such a pity with a Scotsman in the main event, Drew McIntyre facing Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship. What an amazing opportunity. Drew, again, I'm going to talk about WrestleMania and as things unfold, but because I'm recording this on the 12th of March, and hopefully this will be uploaded overnight or whatever, because it's now about 5:20 in the afternoon or evening. Hopefully the WrestleMania, I really do hope WrestleMania goes forward, but with the United States suspending flights from mainland Europe, apart from the UK, many countries going on lockdown, I really am not sure if WrestleMania will go ahead as planned. The last issued statement from the authorities in Tampa, Florida, was that they expect it to actually go ahead at the moment, and that was just a couple of days ago. But I'm getting really fearful for local wrestling events. I'm like that SW one on the 28th of March at Stafford Place, the Circle. It's the Circle, the dress is Stafford Place, and who knows what's going to happen in terms of the authorities. So WrestleMania is unfortunately in danger at the moment. Whether it will happen or not, April 5th in Tampa, Florida. Actually, just about 15 minutes drive from where FCW that I talked about earlier had their facility. Where FCW, where many of the people that we'll see on WrestleMania trained. It's getting very risky whether we'll see WrestleMania take place or not at all. And many of these, the NBA's been suspended. Some of the Formula 1 races look like they're in danger. The Bahrain one is supposed to be, I think it's the second one in about a week's time. It's supposed to be round 2, because they're supposed to be doing the Australian Grand Prix this weekend, which I believe has lost at least one team, the McLaren team. Lots of them waiting right now for the a couple of statements to be made politically on the news, but yeah, certainly a lot of these events are in danger of not happening. So as I record this, WrestleMania is in danger. Will it happen? Will it not? Let's we'll see in the next few days. I think certainly within the next week we may very well see whether WrestleMania will happen or not. A lot of people who may not actually be, there will be a lot of people who will not, if WrestleMania goes ahead as planned on April 5th, there'll be a lot of people who will not be able to, make it to WrestleMania. Again, people from mainland Europe, the United States, closing down, themselves, really closing the border from flights from mainland Europe, which is many countries. I don't know. I seriously do not know whether WrestleMania is going to go ahead as planned. I think may even be the best solution. And I'm not trying to fearmonger. I know that this may not be as bad as it could be, and maybe this. Again, I may not make a separate video on all this, but I could see WrestleMania being postponed. Unfortunately, I really could. I can see it being postponed. I just think, just simply due to the travel bans and the risks that supposedly are associated with this, the coronavirus, the COVID-19. I can see WWE, just simply due to the international fans and the potential, about the lack of fans that paid for their seats, and just due to everything internationally, I could easily see WWE postponing WrestleMania. I would not be hugely surprised if it happens. I hope it doesn't. I hope it does go ahead. I don't know what's going to happen regarding seats and tickets and everything like that. If it goes ahead as planned, a lot of international fans have paid for their tickets, paid for their seats. What would happen about that? I'm sure they may be able to get refunds, but what will happen with those tickets? Are people actually going to be able to buy the tickets? It's large gatherings are banned quite a bit. There are even reports, I'm not really looked into, about WWE holding events at the Performance Centre as backup plans. So who knows? WrestleMania, for the first time ever, I think, in the history of WrestleMania, is in danger of not happening, at least on the scheduled date. And it's weird. Again, before I wrap this up, because I will wrap this up in a couple of minutes, it's amazing to think that, even throughout these years, I don't think WrestleMania, and I think it has actually had, like one of the main performers be knocked out of WrestleMania close to the event. I don't think it's really happened. Quite often it's a wrestler gets hurt, but oh look, they're back in time for WrestleMania, or they're back in time for the Royal Rumble, like John Cena was. It was estimated when he got injured, I can't remember what year it was, but that famous, I think it was in Madison Square Garden, when he came back, and he was thought to be out for many months and that he would miss WrestleMania, but he was back at the Royal Rumble. I think it was one of the years he won, and so he was back and on the road to WrestleMania very quickly. So I think certainly unfortunately WrestleMania and many independent wrestling events, and that's going to affect a lot of independent companies who have events associated with WrestleMania. Unfortunately, let's be serious, let's be truthful about this. The entire WrestleMania weekend and WrestleMania related events are currently in danger of being cancelled with this coronavirus and everything that's going on around it. Regardless of whether you think coronavirus is as serious as they say, whether it's risky as they say, whatever your thoughts on this virus, whether you're panicking or whether you're not fearing anything about it at all, whatever your feelings are about it, certainly I would say WrestleMania is in danger of not happening. And that, for me as a wrestling fan, especially as I said, having a Scotsman like Drew McIntyre in the main event, is just if that gets postponed, it's going to be a horrible situation. Of course, a lot of businesses, a lot of places are also selling WrestleMania parties and get-togethers and gatherings. Forgetting even having to self-isolate yourself and in your house. But if you've not got WrestleMania to watch at the same time, well, this again, being serious about this, there is a potential that authorities may force WWE to call off WrestleMania. Who knows? I think within the next week or so, certainly week to 10 days, I think at the very most, we will have to find out what is happening regarding WrestleMania. Sadly, I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if it does get postponed to later in the year. Hopefully we will get to a situation soon where this starts, with all the action hopefully going against coronavirus gets, it starts getting kind of passing over. It's kind of like, getting rid of the virus hopefully within the next few weeks. Who knows what the situation will be over the next couple of weeks, few months, regarding the coronavirus. But yeah, WWE, anyone who doesn't think it, even if it's not because of the virus itself affecting performers, staff or whatever, the authorities are the ones, even WWE cannot go against the authorities in situations like these. So if WrestleMania does get postponed, don't get too upset about it. It hopefully will take place later in the year or when WWE can do it, but certainly I would not be surprised, but sadly that's the situation we're in now. So I'm going to call it quits on this. It's already been almost an hour and a quarter. Like I said, I want to keep it to that. A lot going on. What I said, I will, if WrestleMania does get postponed, any updates, I do want to make a video about this whole situation with the coronavirus in the next couple of days. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, depends on what announcements and that are made, and I've got plans, to be honest, to do a couple of things, but hopefully we will hear very soon on exact situation of WrestleMania. But as I said, as a Scotsman, born and bred, if WrestleMania is postponed, if that is postponed due to this coronavirus, with the Scotsman in the main event, it's just going to be to be honest, let's face it, WrestleMania itself being postponed would be very upsetting to wrestling fans around the world. Let's just hope that it doesn't happen.